Hey Jeffrey, I'm going to give you some feedback on your logo concepts. First thing I noticed is that with your designs and your concepts, you're trying to fit a lot into one logo. There's certain ways that you can do it where it doesn't seem like it's too much. Like with the first one, I see that you're doing two different designs, but they're totally separate from each other. So the best way to do it is actually to have it where if you have two different elements, so like here you have the tree and you have the wave, try and find a creative way to combine them so that it's actually one element, but it's made up of two different things. So having two different elements a lot of times in logo becomes too much because you start to read it as, you know, individual symbols as opposed to just one individual icon. So with your first idea with the tree and the wave, I think it would be more beneficial for you to try and find a way to combine them. So I can see that you started doing that with number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. But with this, it's still a little bit complicated. So I see the sun rays, and with a logo, since you have limited ability with the colors that you can work with and the lines, and it has to be simple so that you can scale it down, I wouldn't be able to get, by the time you did this digitally, the whole thermometer idea and the icicle, and you know, between having the sun, the icicle, and the thermometer, that's a little bit too much. So I'd stick with two things and then try and find a really, really perfect way to combine them together into one. With the sun, snowflake and compass idea, again, that's going to be a little bit too much because that's three things that you're trying to combine into one logo, and it's just going to be way overcrowded. I think of the 5 that you have, the most promising one is number 5 because at least you have it where it's two elements and then they're combined together in such a way. But I think even with this one, since with outdoor clothing companies, a lot of imagery is used over and over, like waves and trees and mountains and stuff like that. So I think that you need to play with it a little bit more and try and come up with a way to make it a little bit more distinct. And I actually sent you an email just a second ago with I've collected a couple logos that are exactly what you're trying to do, where it's two different elements, but they're combined in such a way that there's more of a harmony between the two, where it's one element, but that one element is made up of the two different elements. So it says two different things about the company, both which obviously reflect the company in such a way that's more descriptive. So I think for yours, like with a lot of these, the imagery reflects what they do, but I don't think that something like the tree and the wave, even though it says that the company does two different things, like they have, you know, more outdoor clothing and maybe more beach type clothing, I guess is what the wave means. I don't really get it reflecting the Off the Grid, the name of the company, or I think it's just Off Grid. But anyway, I think that you should come up with a way to sort of reflect the name a little bit more. I don't think having OG would be the best route to go because a lot of times you can do like a really cool monogram where inside the letter you have a picture. Like maybe if you had like, let's say it was one letter and you had the O, and inside the O was like the wave or the tree or something. So that would be two elements. You'd have the O to reflect the company name, and you'd have the wave to reflect an element of what they did, like beach clothing. I think with yours, it might be more effective to do something very subtle with lines that would sort of imply that grid idea, because Off the Grid is a very distinct name that if you had the imagery and maybe had like the lines coming off of it very subtly, like you don't want it to be too busy, but maybe have like the image itself and then have lines starting to come off of it to kind of imply that whole idea of off the grid. But again, you'd have to keep it more simplified. So I know that sounds like more of a complex idea, but I want you to play around with it because I think that you're on a great track. But what you're playing with right here with your ideas of trying to combine things is really difficult to do because you really got to find the right combination of things. It's like trying to mix, you know, different ingredients in a bowl, and you can only do two ingredients. So, you know, if you mix two things that really don't go well together, then they're just going to, you know, they're not going to mix well. So if you find two elements that with the shape of them and, you know, like the lines and everything, if they can fit well together, if they can mesh well together, then it works out awesome and you have a really, really good logo. If you pick two things that don't work well together, then it's a challenge trying to get them to mesh. So in a nutshell, I want to see you play around with some more ideas. Feel free to keep going with the idea of using two different elements, but play around with different elements and see if you can find things that work well together. Or like I said, play with the whole grid idea, but keep it simplified. You don't want to do tons of lines everywhere because then it gets too crazy. All right, so can't wait to see what other ideas you come up with. Great start, but, push it a little bit more.